September the 26th. Well, it was the day that what became known as the Nord Stream pipeline explosion happened. Extensive damage, gas escape, we all remember. And then, of course, the questions started, the investigation started straight away. And the question at the top of the list was about security of supply when it came to infrastructure, undersea infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this.
I can see the gas coming up. It's quite dramatic.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the leading journalists behind that documentary, Putin Shadow War, please welcome Niels Fastrup. Good to see you. Come and take a seat. Now, it wasn't, I mean, we saw you at the very beginning there, but it wasn't just you, it's a whole team from different companies, different countries as well. Just very quickly tell us how it came about, the documentary.
Well, after Putin invaded Ukraine, we decided that we wanted to investigate how he's waging a hybrid war in Europe, and especially in the Nordic countries. So I teamed up with colleagues from Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and we made a joint investigative team and set about investigating this issue.
And had there ever been any investigations into this before, or when you took this idea to your bosses, your editors, what did they say?
Well, what you've seen is from Western media is only like specific stories that have been made, for instance, the Skripal poisoning in 2018 or incidents like that. But no one has ever investigated the full scale of the hybrid warfare that Russian intelligence agencies is waging in Europe. And that's what we set about doing.
So you got together your team of investigative journalists, you started to find your sources, as you call them in the documentary, and you got all of that together. But where did you start? What was the first thing you thought you wanted to concentrate on?
Well, after just a few weeks before we started investigating, something very mysterious happened in Norway. An internet cable connecting Svalbard and the Norwegian mainland was severed or damaged in some ways, and we started investigating it, and we found out that there's been another incident where communicable cable outside of off the Norwegian coast had been damaged also, and that Russian fishing trawlers had been present at both incidents. So that was our starting point, that something was happening at sea.
But you know, to be really clear about this, there are boats everywhere, right? There are absolutely legitimate Russian boats, Russian trawlers, cargo ships, passenger boats, quite legitimately, right in that whole stretch of water. Lots of them all the time.
Definitely. But what we found from analyzing marine traffic data, from talking to sources, especially intelligence sources throughout the Nordic countries, was that quite a lot of Russian vessels operate in a manner that is not commercially grounded. For instance, you might have a Russian freight vessel that year after year sails into a Norwegian fjord. It goes maybe for several kilometers into this fjord, and then it goes out again. It doesn't fuel, it doesn't put off any goods or anything. So it's like the only explanation, according to our sources, is that what that is about is espionage, it's mapping or investigating how this Russian fjord looks like in the event that Russia wants to invade the Western world.
I mean, I have to say, for a lot of people, that would be, well, that's quite a leap. It is just a boat in that area. But you're saying you feel and your team feel there is a lot more to it. How are you tracking these boats? I mean, is it just standard way that, open source that we can all see, or?
Yeah, some of these boats can be tracked using open source, especially the civilian Russian vessels that transmit on IRS. But if you look at the Russian Navy vessels, they don't transmit on IRS. So we were lucky to team up with a very interesting source, a former UK naval intelligence officer, that were able, using, you could call it, some other OSINT or open source intelligence methods, he's able to access Russian naval communication, internal Russian naval communication. And studying that data, we could see a pattern of Russian vessels operating in the northern region, especially in the Baltics, but also in the North Sea, mapping infrastructure, including offshore wind farms.
How many, give us some idea of how many vessels you were tracking, or vessels that you thought were not acting in the way that you thought they should be?
Well, we were able to identify at least 50 Russian vessels operating in this way, but according to our sources, including the Nordic intelligence agencies, the number is probably a lot higher than that.
Now, you've mentioned military, but these, from what I understand, you think these are civilian vessels as well that are sort of being used, you say? So they've got other bits of kit on board? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's important to remember that Russia is a different state from a European state. It has a marine doctrine that allows it to mobilize civilian assets to conduct its warfare, also in peacetime. So if you have a civilian Russian maritime company, they might be forced or obliged by law to help the Russian military doing espionage.
So what you're saying is, and of course the Kremlin has denied any of this, but you're suggesting that they are putting military personnel or equipment on board civilian ships for purposes such as tracking or mapping. Now, there was one particular very large ship that you were determined you were going to find. Tell us about that.
Well, at some point in November last year, James, this UK naval intelligence source we worked with, texted me one evening that a Russian known spy vessel, the Admiral Vladimirsky, was heading from the North Sea into Kattegat, into Danish waters. And he asked me if I was interested in that, and obviously I was. And I wanted to see if it was possible to go and film it.
Okay, so you hired a boat, went out there. Should we see what happened? So this is what happened when Niels and the captain of the boat decided to follow the tracking and go and see if they could find this ship. Take a look.
Hvor er det stærkt. So guys, I hope this is being recorded. We are just a few hundred meters away from Vladimirsky. We're filming everything on the ship. We're filming antennas, as we've been told by the source. I can see crew members walking around on the deck. I think they're watching us. There's two men staring at us. Wow, they're looking at us. This is really a strange situation. Almost a tense situation. They're looking at us.
Kommer ind med
Med hvad?
gevær.
Gevær? Fuck.
Excuse my language.
I had a conversation earlier as to whether or not we should edit that before or after, and I thought, well, it's what you said. What did it appear that they were holding?
Well, he was holding a Russian military rifle and clearly showing us that he had it.
But what did you do next?
Well, after filming a few seconds, we decided
Seconds,
to
by
head
the way,
off,
yeah.
to head off again, slowly, really like in a calm way, not to provoke them into anything.
You didn't wave.
We didn't wave, no. We were just like, there was a staring competition between them and us, and they were filming us the other way also.
So what do you say they were doing?
Well, the Admiral Vladimirsky, according to our data and our sources, had been on a mission throughout November last year through the Baltic Sea, into Danish waters and into the North Sea, and especially in the North Sea, especially off the coast of UK, the coast of Belgium, here where we are now, and the Netherlands. It's been mapping offshore, newly built offshore wind farms in order to, at least according to our sources, identify vulnerabilities in the event you want to sabotage. How could you knock these offshore wind farms out?
I mean, you've shown your findings, your photograph, your video, your documentary to various people who look at these things. And what has been the reaction?
The reaction has been that this is very real. Russia has a secret military program which is about mapping offshore wind farms and other kinds of energy infrastructure, power cables, gas pipes, etc. in Europe, and that it's about preparing for sabotage in the event of an escalation in the current conflict. I mean, that was the very clear message we got from all our sources.
And as you would expect, the message from Russia was that this is ridiculous, that there's no such thing. But what do you take from that? You're sitting in front of a room of people who have a lot of knowledge about the infrastructure, or at least know those that do. I mean, what do you take from your findings?
Well, I mean, since the 1990s, a lot of infrastructure has been moved at sea. It's easy to target at sea. It's easy to sabotage it without being discovered. So I think it's very vulnerable, and if you sabotage that infrastructure, you can do a lot of damage to our societies. So I think we have a major security issue here, definitely, for your industry and for the rest of Europe.
Niels, it's been fascinating to hear you. The documentary, Putin's Shadow War. When can people in this room get to see it? 'Cause I know it's been out in some places.
It will be. I mean, it will air in Germany on ZDF quite soon, I think, and hopefully throughout Europe also in the coming months.
Niels Fastrup, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.